Can you feel it? The sound of my bass. Good vibes in my head. Good vibes everywhere. You wanna dance to my banjo?
Hey guys, thank you for hanging out with us today. We're going to be discussing young and being African in the diaspora, and we're going to be focusing on just discussing issues around identity and belonging. So it's going to be a big one. Sit back and hang out with us as we try and navigate through the topic. Obviously, you guys African but living in the diaspora and trying to find your way and mix around. How are you finding that?
It's a good topic. It's a big topic to start talking about. I don't even know where to start.
Start from anywhere.
Beginning.
I'll tell you guys, I moved to Australia when I was 12. So I did primary school in Botswana, and then I did high school here in Australia, and then now I'm doing uni in my third year. And I think trying to figure out if you're Australian, Zimbabwean, or where you fall in, it's so hard. It's so hard. Yeah, a bit of everything. Like,
you're mixed out.
Yeah, literally, I'm like, okay, I came here, I'm like, yep, I'm from Zimbabwe, and then I did, high school here 6-7 years, and I'm like, okay, but I have a lot of Australian identity in me, and like, where do you fall? Like, I know a lot of us here have similar ideas and topics.
What are you finding hard?
I think it's just trying. You can't be the same as everyone else because you have a different story. Like, I'm Zimbabwean, but I'm Australian as well. Like, I've been here for so long. If I went to Zimbabwe, I would not even know where to start. But here, I know Australia, like, easy. So I think it's the hardest thing is you can't fit in, is trying to understand that you're different. Like, you're in the middle. Like, you're literally both.
Okay. So that's to speak mostly to your identity.
Yeah.
What about you belonging? Where is that the same? Where do you think you belong?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah.
I have to think on it, and then someone else can pitch in.
Anybody else? Tendo, you look like you've got a lot to say.
Where do I belong?
Where do you belong, or how do you identify, rather?
Well, the people I hang around with is like shapes who I am and how I view myself, and I surround myself around other Zimbabwean people because I feel safe and comfortable, and we all can relate, and we can all share similar experiences. So I feel like where I surround myself, for example, at the uni I go to, there's a lot of Zimbabwean youth that go to that uni, so it helps seeing familiar faces with similar stories.
Yeah.
So would you say then, Rutendo, would it be fair to say that there's comfort then that comes being amongst your own?
Yeah, and a bit of security knowing that you've got people that look like you, understand the same language as you, grew up similar as well. I think that helps. And then you're all trying to navigate this new journey of higher education, of university. So I think it helps.
It helps. That's
Me? Well, I was born in England, and I lived there majority of my life before coming to Australia. So for me, it was a bit harder because I felt like I had my English background, my Zim background, and then now after being in Australia for 5-6 years now, I also have an Australian background. So sometimes
and a messed up accent.
Yeah.
Let's get into the accent.
No, because my accent comes out wherever I am. It's a hard one. I can't just stick to one accent.
No. I hear you.
Yeah, so and because of that, people will claim that I'm not from this place. I'm That's not the point. It's just it's hard to stick to one accent because I've grown up and heard like all different kinds of people speak, and I've adopted each and everything from those. So when it comes to stuff like belonging, I feel like the place I feel what's the word? Where I belong the best is when I'm surrounded by my Zim brothers and sisters, because as Tendo was saying, it's like they look like you, they know how you like grown up, they know they feel the same things as you, and I know I just feel like I can relate to them on a much more personal level than just like anyone else. And in England, I didn't have a lot of Zim people around me. It was mainly a lot of like pure Englishmen and women. But here in Australia, as you can see, there's a lot of us. There's a lot of Zimbos everywhere. So
Zimbos.
Yeah.
They're everywhere.
Yeah.
So it's beautiful.
Thank you, Tabs. Pharaoh, you're way too quiet.
What's going on?
Final thoughts together.
They wanted to speak the most.
Whoa.
Okay. I'm quiet.
Just piggyback off of Tabs and Tender, like especially being surrounded by so many young Zim people in our generation, like it just feels normal. You know what I mean? You're drawn to that, and that's kind of where you belong. But I think there's a difference when it comes to identity when you're surrounded by older generations. Of Zim because they've spent most of their time in Zim. And especially if you're born in Zim and you move when you're like 2 or 3, they sort of consider you Australian. So then there's a whole discussion of where they're like, are you Australian or are you Zim? Especially with us not having the accents or fluent in Shona.
That's
a different topic. Like, we can talk about it. But are you finding that the gap between obviously your parents and yourselves, you know, and you spending much of your time, that generational gap, do you find that it presents with issues or with, you know, relating?
Oh, no,
yes,
100%.
I think that's
120%.
happens within like your family, like your parents and yourself. It's conflict in like different views on different things. And understanding, like they might not understand why you do what you do. Because they did not do that when they were young,
growing up.
Where they were from.
Are you having those conversations? Are you sitting down and explaining?
Trying to.
I think what's the response? What's the typical Zim mom's response?
Oh my gosh. It depends what you're talking about.
Boys? No?
I don't even talk about
I am the boys.
I think something my mom said was that I asked her the other day, me and Taps asked her the other day, what's the hardest thing about raising us? And she goes, you guys are you grow up differently from how we did. Sometimes she doesn't know how to actually raise us when we go out and this is what we experience, you know. She's like, when she was our age, she didn't have what we had. Like, some of us drive, we go to uni, we work, and she's like, it's completely different when you have kids who are doing things so different from you and you're trying to figure out how to actually navigate that. And it's like, I guess trying to have conversations to your parents, like, okay, this is what I feel, this is what I experience. I know it's different, but we have to meet in the middle. And it's even us trying to understand their culture and everything. I think I had a conversation with my uncle and it was talking about, I think, like, getting married and all these things, and I'm like, oh, I don't want to do this. He's like, but you need to listen and understand, and we can have a conversation to be able to navigate all of that, because it's hard. And you can't lose your culture. It's part of your identity. It's where you belong as well. Like, we're Zimbabwean at the end of the day. Some from the UK, but we're still Zimbabwean at the end of the day. We have that. So it's really hard.
You've referred to it as their culture, Shaniqua. Explain to me what that's about.
Oh, that's a good question. I think when I think of culture, I'm learning from my parents. I think that's why I refer to it as their culture. Yes, it's mine, but I think my culture is a mix of Australian culture and Zimbabwean culture. Like, I think it's a mixture. It's like, when I think of like my children, they'll be raised in a combination of both cultures. Like the Zimbabwean, Australian, youth, whatnot culture. Like, it's a combination, I think, So I think my culture, their culture, it just combines into like mine,
And so what, do you guys understand anything about your culture? Are you guys having those conversations with your parents?
I'm very much learning. For me, it was very different for me because my older brother, he grew up in Zim. He was born there, grew up in Zim. So he knows a lot more than me. But me growing up in the UK, we didn't really explore our culture until I've come to Australia. Like, I would say coming to Australia, I've learned a lot more about me and my home than I was when I was back home in the UK.
And so, but at home, how much of that culture is at play?
Do you mean in like the physical sense of like what we do, or just
anything that you do? You know, as far as your conversations with mom and dad, respect, things, normal things that you see. How much of that culture do you think that you get to experience at home, and how much of it shapes you?
I think I think quite a bit actually. Like, because our parents took as much as they could. They held on to a lot, like in terms of respect, you know, the roles in the house, understanding what goes on, you know, learning, and obviously from being a Christian household, that adds to it as well. I think it's a whole combination, but I think my parents have done their best to teach me and my brother and my cousin, like, the basics of culture. And yeah, I think probably the most important thing I've learned is just respect and understanding, like, how things go in a Zim household, because
everybody's duties, everybody knows what how they contribute to the family and how with me, I would talk about me and Phil, we were born in Zimbabwe, but we moved here just before we were turning 2, and we've never been back since. So when it comes to like learning and understanding our culture, it's one of those ones we learn through like stories or like what they from what they experience, and then we just have to figure out, which can be a big challenge. I find just being able to like relate and like connect is hard when you like, because I don't remember when you're turning 2, like you don't remember anything. I don't even know. I couldn't even tell you any memories or anything. So it's one of those ones which is hard until I go back to Zimbabwe. Then I'll be able to fully embrace and understand where I come from. So it's one of those ones like with me as well. It's like I'm more Australian than Zimbabwean in the sense of like just how I grew up. I grew up in Australia. So when it comes to like conversations with my parents about how they grew up and how I grew up, sometimes it's hard for us to understand each other because they might not understand why I think like I'm entitled for something here because that's normal here, I guess here, but over there it was not normal. So it's one of those ones we just all have to learn from each other and just because obviously this world is changing so fast. Every day. The time, like even like traditional like I don't know, like norms in Zimbabwe is not normal here. And that's where it's like we clash a bit.
And so do you feel like because of that gap of you never returning home after you came, do you sometimes feel like you're out of touch? With who you are. Do you feel like there could be gaps even in your identity?
That's where even like with just terms of family, like I have family that I've never met before, cousins I've never met before, and it's like it's a weird one because you talk to them like on social media and stuff like that, and it's like hard to build the connection unless you're actually not met them. So God willing, hopefully at the end of this year we get to go, and then that will change my life forever. That experience. So I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, that's good, and I'm so glad that you're looking forward to it. And obviously, so how much do you value then your own culture? How do you think it's important? I'll bet you guys not knowing it. How much do you think it's valuable in people's lives, as far as identity and belonging?
I think it's a big part of your own identity and your family. Being able to understand, I think I value understanding and acknowledging. I think that helps me understand, like, just like Zimbabwe in general. Through stories is what helps me, or like music, that helps me connect.
Means a lot.
Friends, hanging out with friends from Zimbabwe, and even having friends that are experiencing the same thing as me is like they grew up here, so they know how I feel, and we can just talk about it together. I think that's definitely important. I make sure I communicate that.
Okay, that's how much do you value culture? How important do you think it is?
I think it's a very important thing, no matter what culture you're coming from, because it really shapes who you are and it shapes who you want to be as well in the future. So learning from that culture, because learning from culture, there's people you're looking up to in your own culture, and that's going to decide how you present yourself, whether that's at work, whether that's at school, just in your daily life. And learning about that, I think it's very vital to make sure you learn the best about yourself, so you can understand yourself the best as well. Because if you don't know yourself, you don't know how to navigate the world at all.
And so from that standpoint, are you guys opening yourself up to learning?
Oh, definitely.
100%.
How are you learning?
I started with my language.
Language, yeah, I was going to say. I will be fluent by the end of the year.
That's the start.
It's a big part.
Yeah, no, so true. I think for me, 100%, back to your question, I value culture a lot. I think also the older you get, the more important you realize it is.
Yeah,
like I never thought about my children, what are they going to know about being Zimbabwean from me? Because, I think it's so important. And even like how I'm learning, I think for me, it's just asking questions. I've got my grandma with us at the moment, and so me it's like asking questions, hearing stories, having conversations. Nice. Yeah, it's really nice. Even having conversations with your parents, not fights, but like conversations where you can share your experience and then do this. Because I never used to understand, why my parents may have thought this way until I was older. Like why? Because it's it's their first time here in Australia too. As much as it's yours. So I just think asking questions, facilitating conversations, and even having conversations like this with people your age, similar experiences. Because the best people who would understand is it's us. Who grew up here, or even just having conversations and asking and being open to learn. As well, because I know there's some people who I've met, they're like, oh nah, fully Australian, I don't know, I don't want to listen, but it's like, it's still part of you. Like having that openness and willingness to learn is important. Yeah,
sounds good. And so obviously for you, Shaniqua, you've come here a little bit older, 12. How did you find that transition from going, obviously you're in Botswana, there's some people that are the same color as you, they probably speak the same language, and then you've come into an environment it's completely different. How was that transition, and how did that make you feel as far as you belonging?
It was insane. Definitely the same color. Like growing up in Africa, grew up in Botswana, did primary school there. Everyone was the same color essentially. You had similar experiences, and you get here. I was thrown into high school, and everyone's different from me. It was a big culture shock. I'm lucky to have a lot of family in Australia, and that helped with my transition. It was amazing, but sometimes you still do feel alone when you're in high school. Like you're speaking and you're like, does this person even understand what I'm saying? Like I know I'm speaking English, but and even just dealing with the questions and there's a lot. But
I think you're talking about growing up as an African child in a school that's predominantly not like
African,
it's
or multicultural.
It's very that's a whole conversation.
It's a whole conversation.
How to survive that.
And do you want to speak to that, Faro?
When you grow up in a predominantly white school, I feel like you struggle with identity the most.
That's what you said.
100%.
And not even in the sense of everyone around me doesn't look the same, but you look at their hair, you start straightening your hair. You look at the clothes they wear, you start trying to dress like them. See how their parents act towards them.
And your parents
are like, you go back to your house, and you're like, what?
Like she gets to go for sleepovers.
Don't get me started.
It's a different conversation.
I never understood sleepovers, because obviously in Zimbabwe, sleepovers, I don't know, but I'm assuming they're not normal to
they're not normal.
But over here, it's such a thing to do with your friends. I would never Tendo and I would have to come up with a plan 2 days in advance, and then we'd have to start begging 2 days in advance.
For a sleepover.
At least you went.
Sorry.
It's okay. I was like, at least you went to the sleepovers.
They don't happen in Zimbabwean households. So would you say then, you guys, there's a level of identity crisis that you guys experience at some point, and especially in high school. You're primary school, you're wanting to fit in. It's normal for those, your age, you're impressionable, you envy what, you just want to look normal.
You just want to be like everyone else.
So, and then it doesn't make sense why you've got two piggies that are sticking out instead of, your hair down, and then you've got friends that are going for sleepovers like you're saying, and mom saying, nah, not in my house.
That's when you struggle to understand the connection of why. That's when you start asking why. And then I feel like even that's when people need to be careful, because that's when you can kind of have a resentment to your culture. And a resentment to your traditions and your values as a culture, because you're not understanding how another culture can that's acceptable, but over here it's not. And you're trying to fight between the two. It's very hard, and especially when you're at a vulnerable age, like when you're young, like you're still learning about the world and how everything is, and then you're not understanding. It's hard.
And so I'm taking that they're not explaining to you why.
I think
it's just no, and then
because I said so.
No.
From my experience with Zim parents, they just, I think it's more of a what the parent says goes.
100%.
But then when you face these crises, you start to like, that's when you start looking at your parents and thinking like, what's going on?
Because we didn't understand why.
And they don't value explaining to like younger children. It's just that's it, you know.
You're just a child.
But it's like now
we know best.
You look back at it now and you understand why they did what they did. Why they said no. You understand, but it's like you wish in the moment you could have understood, but I guess with time and maturity, you won't. I understand it until now. Like now, I understand why we couldn't have sleep. Oh, like, you know what I mean? Now
I understand.
Like there's pedophiles out there.
Exactly.
When you're moving, and they can't tell.
Not true.
How do you tell a 5-year-old that? They won't
understand. They won't understand.
So it's one of them ones. It's like you have to understand. Like they were trying to protect you in the way that they could.
They knew.
But you weren't mature enough to.
Like I know, like my kids are not having sleepovers.
It's funny.
But I think the difference is that like when we have our own kids, I'd like to explain best to them, because that's a different thing that I learned. Like, you know, I didn't know why only until I was like 18, 19. But hopefully when we have our kids, we can foster those conversations. Obviously, not when they're like 2, but when we grow older, as they grow, we have those conversations.
How about the overall just Zimbabwean community? How do they relate to you guys, or how do you relate to them outside of the home? So I know there's issues, you know, obviously within the home, but you know, external to that, how are you finding interactions, whether it's auntie from next door, or how do you find yourselves in situations where you're just amongst other Zimbabweans?
I think it's one of the ones where it's like everybody knows each other, or everyone has heard of you or your family. So it's like you could see someone and they'll have a connection to your mom or your dad, but you've never met them or never heard of them. So it's one of those ones where it's like when you run into like the older generations, like they have respect, they value like, they value like your family and like your family name. I've learned
there's a deep connection
with your family name.
And do you guys is that something as well that you take on and consider important, or?
I think it is important. I think because the closest Zimbabwean community to me would be my Zimbabwean friends, and then there's obviously more people out there. I think it's the more you realize there's a community out there, the more I realize it's really important. And like obviously we all try to do a good job of like community events and all that, but I think as the youth we're kind of more like, oh, these are my friends, this is who I hang out with. If I see auntie, but as I grow older, I realize the value in a whole community itself. Like, you won't realize the support you have, because essentially we all have similar experiences as Zimbabweans, as a whole community. I think it's a bit hard to navigate that, because the youth were kind of
hard-headed.
We're hard-headed. You're like, no, I just want to hang out with my friends. Like, you know, it's got nothing to do with me sometimes. But I think it's important to realize that there's a community who have similar values and appreciate where we come from and know it more. Like, similar to what we're trying to do here. Like, it's the same idea. Yeah.
And so as young people, do you guys just feel like when you hang out, you know, obviously we can relate, you know, where are you getting your counsel, you know? You're hanging out as young people, you obviously need somebody to speak to, I think, because you're young.
Yeah.
Where does your counsel come from?
It's a good question.
Where does it come from? Because then you're telling me mom and dad every day. Don't talk to me about boys, don't talk to me about, you know. But part of your identity as well, and learning, like you're saying, fostering that learning and continued learning and around your culture is receiving counsel from older people.
Yeah, of course.
Do you have those
to be
facilities
honest,
around you?
I think our generation relies on each other, like, as
scary fire.
No, because I don't know, it's just going to someone who's like the older generation, you're either getting dismissed or like you feel not understood, you know?
Yeah.
So it's like if you have a problem, you would like ask I guess the people around you.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Like, tell me this happened. I don't understand what to say.
I think with us, it's a lot of trial and error. So it's like if I'm going through something that's happening to me, I'm gonna ask around to see if anyone else has gone through that. And once I've finished going through what I have, maybe someone else is gonna have that same problem that I did. So now they can come to me and I can explain. Oh, this is what I did. This is what happened for me. Maybe do something else. Or this works.
Even if it's the blind leading the blind. You take your chances.
I think I'm blessed with a lot of family, so I always lean on them. I have an aunt. Whether if I'm not talking to my parents, I'm likely to talk to my aunt or to my uncle. Like, I've realized it's only like in the last year or two that I realized seeking wise counsel, seeking counsel from people older than you is so important, because sometimes Tender might tell me, no, go there. Why she's on my right. Whereas if you talk to someone older, like, I've experienced this, but stay home, type of thing. I think I do try my best to go seek counsel from like people older than me, and especially if it's a question about culture. I'm likely not to go to my friends because I don't know. I do ask a lot of questions. Like, sometimes it can be hot conversations, but I try to ask questions and seek counsel from people older than me to the best of my ability. But the friends do know.
So how much do issues to do with that? Obviously identity, like you're saying, Shaniqua. How much do they affect your day-to-day life? You having those gaps where you're like, okay, I go out, I'm Australian, I come back home, I'm fully Zimbabwean. You know what I mean? How does that affect you, in your normal life?
Well, for me, I've just learned to code switch in it. So so I can go to my regular uni job, and I guess it's not necessarily a good thing, but I've learned to assimilate to the crowd that I'm around. So I can So I can just deal with
you do what you need to do.
Exactly.
Hence the change in accent.
But then at the end of the day, when I come home, that's where I feel the most comfortable and the most myself is
the most authentic.
Most authentically me.
Do you find that sometimes you go out and you have to try and fit in?
100%.
And you just want to fit in with the crowd. Find that.
I think so. I think we're all in uni, and uni is a different ballgame from high school to begin with. So many more people, so many more different things, so many more like experiences
and exposure to different things.
Like, you learn a lot. You're like, but I think as much as we still try, we're still different. Like, I've had to learn and come to the conclusion that I'm still different. Like, sometimes I walk into class and I realize, I'm the only African here. Like, I've got nothing to do with, like, I can't do anything about it. But
that's just how it is.
It's just how it is, and you just learn to cope with it. I think the gaps come when maybe you're having conversations or you do different things, or someone asks you, what do you like? For us, a big part of my life is I go to church on Sundays. Someone might ask you, what do you do on the weekend? I go to church. They're like, what? That's crazy. Like, a big part of my life. But you just have to stick with it, and if people actually want to continue having conversations to you, that's on them. Like, you can't change the reaction someone's going to give you, but you can give them your best shot and you try your best.
And so do you find that, as you've obviously grown up and you're becoming more aware of just, okay, I'm still, I get into a room, I walk in, I'm the only black person that's in there. Does that intensify your need to find your own identity and be in touch with that? Does that does it make it more important for you to just want to be, okay, what is it about me being Zimbabwean? What does it mean to be Zimbabwean, and how do I become? Do you find, or are you like, oh, you know what, I'm Australian, I'm Zimbabwean, I'll just go like that? Or do you find, okay, I just want to be deeply rooted in being Zimbabwean, whatever that means, and so I'm going to pursue it as you've grown, because that's who you are ultimately. How does that make any sense, or is it
makes sense?
Just thinking about it.
Like, for me, like me and Farah, we both dance, and the type of dance we do is like it's Australian dance, like sport. So there's obviously Australians. So being like one of a few, like African, not even just Zimbabwean, but just African, or even just like any multicultural like person doing that sport. it's one of those ones where it's like because we've done it since we were young. When we were young, it's like it's something I guess I used to always be more conscious of, knowing that I'm the only like black person, I guess, because we dance on stage, and it's like I think it's one of those ones because you will stick out on the stage. Yeah. So it was one of those ones where it was one of them ones where you just like. I think it did a lot into my mental of like I have to be perfect because I know people will be looking at me.
The limelight.
Yeah. It's one of those ones that you put pressure on yourself. Especially when I was young, I put pressure on myself, but now it's like. I love it. Like I love the fact that I'm.
You like the limelight.
I love it. I love it because I know everybody's looking at me. I love it. So it's funny how like as you grow older, your mindset towards something or view of like the fact being the only black person changes. So I think that's something I've really noticed, especially in this sport. That it's like it is what it is.
It is what it is. Yeah.
So obviously, you guys, are you guys aware of Zim community at all?
I am.
Its existence and that is what other services that we can offer you around those things. We're talking about counsel. Do you guys trust people from the Zim community to give you counsel?
Oh, definitely.
100%. I think it's knowing more about like what's going on and like having those open events and spaces is really cool to be able to ask questions and see what's going on, and you get to feel more connected. Like we've all been saying, the more we're around one another, we feel more connected. Yeah.
All right. I feel like as a youth community, a Zimbabwean community, that we all need to stay united. I feel like we should have more events or like gatherings. So I think everybody should be involved. And if you ever hear about anything going on in the Zimbabwean community, I feel like we're there. That's where it's at. That's where you should be.
Yeah. That's
really.
Boom. For me, what I gotta tell you guys is, the Zim community is gonna help each and every one of us like a lot, and the more that I hang out with my people, and the more we get involved with each other, the more we're gonna learn, and the more we're gonna grow together. So any chance you guys get, whether that's from events, whether that's from sports, anything like that, I feel like you guys will really just take the time to explore it, and I think not only will you enjoy it because we outside, but you'll learn a lot. You'll learn a lot, and me myself, I'm still learning, and I think that's a really valuable lesson helping me, but for all of us.
So don't be afraid to come outside. The Zim community is growing, it's thriving. There'll be so many more things to come. I just think, just bring your friends, be outside. We, all 4 of us, all 5 of us will be there all the time. We'll be there. We'll be there. So
Outside.
Yeah, just don't be afraid, and like don't think it's weird to be part of a community, because I think a lot of us shy away because
I don't want to mix with my mom and
dad. Exactly. So don't be afraid. Just come along. You'll meet someone. You never know who you meet. So.
And just remember, this community is going to really help you guys network. Remember to support each other in any businesses, because why would you hide away from your people? They're the ones who are supposed to support you the most. So I think we should really work on that.
Nice. That's good. Thank you, guys. I think this brings us to the end of the podcast. We will see you next time.
Bye.
Can you feel it? The sound of my bass. Good vibes in my head. Good vibes everywhere. You wanna dance to my banjo? Get up and dance to my banjo.